And joining us now to discuss President Trump's tariff policies is Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital, and Tony Delgado, co-founder of Latino Wall Street. So first of all, good afternoon to you both. Thanks for coming on. Rod, I'll start with you today. So broadly speaking, in your opinion, how have the recent tariffs affected U.S. businesses, consumers, and the overall economy?
Well, the economy is doing extremely well. We've been quite impressed and pleasantly surprised in certain respects. I'm a free trader, I always have been. But the truth is, we've never had free trade except within the United States because our free trade deals have historically been extremely lopsided in favor of our allies. And that made sense after World War II. That made sense during the Cold War. It hasn't really made sense since then. And it's about time that we rebalanced. So we're seeing that happen, and we haven't seen the predicted inflation, and we haven't seen the predicted recession. I think we're really on track for a better global system.
Okay, Tony, same question to you and your reaction to what Rod said just now.
Well, I mean, President Trump is having to play hardball, right? He had to come in swinging as soon as he took office. He had to shake things up. So there was a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market, right? Initially, we had a pullback in the stock market, but now we see that a lot of that fear and uncertainty was just that, right? It was fear of the unknown. It was fear of going into something new, and the market has now rebounded. And a lot of these trade deals are getting negotiated. So if you have to negotiate, who better than the person who wrote the art of the deal?
So, Tony, there have been a lot of legal challenges towards this tariff agenda that President Trump has imposed. And one of the points that the Trump administration has brought up is, do trade deficits threaten national security? That's one of the points. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you see that, we saw this during COVID, where you had essential supplies, medical equipment, medicine all being produced overseas. And then we had shortages, right? So I do think that it's a national security threat to not have more of these things made in America. And that's why we're excited for the president's America First agenda, bringing manufacturing back, using AI and automation. A lot of these factories really need to be in the United States, because if not, we're going to be at a huge disadvantage.
So, Rod, do you equate trade deficits to a national security issue?
They absolutely are. And, if you're talking about a relatively small deficit over a relatively short period of time, that it's not a big deal. If you're talking about a purposeful policy, such as we pursued during the Cold War, that makes sense. We were trying to stand up our allies. We were trying to help them recover from being flattened in the war. It doesn't make sense today. And Tony nailed it. I mean, when we're completely dependent on China for pharmaceuticals and, for that matter, rare earths, it's just crazy, as the Chinese are likely to find out in being completely dependent on Australia for iron ore. You've got to have domestic industry that takes care of national security needs. And if you don't, you're just whistling past the graveyard.
So, Rod, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here. So, trade deficits have existed in every administration, not just the Trump administration. It has been longstanding. Why does the Trump administration get to declare national emergency?
Well, it gets to because the American people elected him overwhelmingly. He won all 7 swing states. He won an historic popular vote victory and an electoral vote victory. And so, clearly the people of this country have decided that we need a new direction. And the truth is, this is a good policy that made sense in the 50s and in the 80s that stopped making sense sometime in the 90s. And the Clinton administration and then the Bush administration indulged this fantasy that somehow this trade opening, most favored nation status, WTO membership, all the rest, complete outsourcing of US industry would democratize China. And that was never true and has not taken place.
Okay, Tony, your reactions, and as well, let me ask you, who bears the cost of tariffs?
Well, I think the one thing I want to touch on is, for decades, we've been told that our greatest allies are people in other continents all across the world, when we have our 2 greatest allies should really be Canada and Mexico. and potentially other countries in Latin America where we're on the same hemisphere. If we do have to rely on Mexico and Canada for imports, they're closer, right? And they're closer from a national security standpoint. I think relying on China and Asia and places really, really far away as our greatest ally is not the best move forward. I think we need to strengthen relations with Latin America and with Canada. And as far as who bears the cost of tariffs, I mean, that's capitalism and that's the free market. It should make sense that things cost more if they are imported. So President Trump is restoring common sense to the economy.
Okay, Rod, ask you another thing about trade tariffs and in relation to our relationship with allies. Does it strain these relationships with key U.S. trading partners if you're putting tariffs on them?
Well, it's a tremendous adjustment. They're not used to it, just like they're not used to having to carry their weight in the NATO alliance, where historically and to this day, the United States pays 70.5% of the defense bill for an alliance of 32 nations. 31 wealthy nations, collectively with a larger population than the United States, pick up about 29.5% of the bill. And Donald Trump's recent agreement with NATO to move everybody up to a uniform 5% of GDP is a big adjustment to those guys, but it's necessary and it makes them stronger. And these trade deals will make them stronger in that you start leveling the playing field with your biggest trade partner, us, and you start encouraging domestic industry in both countries that is atrophied.
Okay, Tony, I want to build on what Rod is saying just now. Could tariffs, in terms of relations, push U.S. adversaries closer to each other?
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw that uh, with the financial sanctions that were put on Russia during the Biden administration, right? We locked Russia out from using the US dollar, right? We froze a bunch of assets of Russia, and it did push China and Russia closer together. So, yeah, other alliances are going to form, but we're also going to figure out who our real friends are, right? So, I think, again, this is a shakeup. We had the country essentially running on Tesla autopilot for the last 4 years with a president who clearly had dementia, and now the adults are back in control. We're taking the wheel, and we're going to shake things up. So yes, it is going to push our adversaries closer together, but it's also going to push our allies closer together.
Okay, Rod, do you agree with what you just heard?
I do agree with the giant caveat that underpins this whole thing. America is 4% of global population. It's 26% of global GDP. These countries need us. Maybe not so much Russia at the moment, although they do a lot better if they made peace in Ukraine and cut an economic deal with the United States. But China is dependent on exports. For that matter, Germany is even more dependent on exports than China. These countries have to sell to the world's biggest consumer market. So there's a limit to the harm that gets done in either direction. And I really think Donald Trump has it figured out.
Okay, Tony, as the government becomes more reliant on the revenue from these tariffs, and we've heard from Treasury Secretary Bessent that billions are coming in, I'm just wondering, would it be more difficult fiscally to reduce or remove them as the government gets more and more dependent on them?
Well, I mean, you want to zoom out and you want to see, where do you want the country to be in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years? And relying on overseas trade, right? Specifically China for electric cars and electric car batteries, right? You know, you're going to get to a point where China goes and says, okay, listen, you have to buy the batteries from us, right? And then you're going to fast forward, and 5 to 10 years down the line, they're just going to say, hey, you know what? You have to buy the cars from us. We're not going to sell you the car batteries if you don't buy the whole car from us. So it puts us in a disadvantage to be relying on these foreign nations. And I think we have to focus on this made in America, built in America policy.
Okay, well, guys, it's a fascinating conversation, but we're out of time for today. We can leave it there for now. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.